Well, hello there. Who are you?
This is the Zodiac speaking.
Killing must feel good to God, too. He does it all the time. And are we not created in his image?
We all go a little mad sometimes.
After all, murder is, or should be, an art.
I could kill you now pretty easily. Do some interesting things before anyone showed up.
What are these films you can't wait to look at?
Welcome to the Final Girls podcast and the 11th episode of our series dedicated to on-screen serial killers from horror film history. I'm your host, Anna Bogutska, and in this episode, I will not be disrespecting the Chuck. I'm joined by one of my favorite people to podcast with, film critic and podcaster Becky Dark, to dive deep into our favorite supernaturally possessed serial killing doll, Chucky. From his origins in Child's Play from 1988, Chucky has spawned 8 films and a TV series, which has just aired its 3rd season. Created and shepherded by Don Mancini, the Chuckyverse has evolved from a high-concept 80s slasher to becoming one of the most beloved and queerest horror franchises ever. In this episode, we cover the entire Chucky family tree, which obviously includes the Chuck himself, who has been voiced continuously by character actor legend Brad Dourif, and his partner Tiffany, voiced and played by the iconic Jennifer Tilly, as well as their gender-fluid child, Glenn Glenda, voiced by Billy Boyd. We touch on all the films in the series, as well as the 2019 remake, so there will be spoilers for everything except the show. If you enjoyed this conversation, do check out Becky and mine's conversation about The Bride of Chucky, which was part of our 2nd series, and you can find on the main feed of the show. If you're enjoying this show, please consider taking 30 seconds of your day to leave us a review over an Apple Podcast, because I too would like to buy back my childhood via vintage dolls from the 80s, and reviews help people discover the show. And if you're hankering for more in-depth discussions about new horror releases, horror TV shows, and books, head over to the Final Girls Patreon, where you can also support us. You can also follow along to what I'm covering in this serial killer series over on Letterboxd, and all of this is linked in the show notes. And with all of that said, please enjoy our take on Child's Play and the Chuckyverse. Becky.
Anna.
Did you have a childhood doll?
I had a few dolls.
Tell me about them.
But like none sort of like that talked or kind of did anything particularly like exciting. I had like baby dolls that you have like when you're a little girl. Mm-hmm. And the most exciting thing that they did was like, you'd lie them on their back and their little eyes would close. So they're sort of like weighted, aren't they? So their little eyes would close. And I used to, brush their hair, and I had a little pram for them, like proper kind of indoctrinating small girls into like being mums before they even hit puberty. Absolutely bizarre behaviour. And I had like Barbie dolls and Cindy dolls. So yeah, I did have dolls.
Did anything creepy ever happen with your dolls? Or did you ever wish for your dolls to come alive?
I mean, of course. And no, nothing creepy ever happened. Thank goodness. It's funny actually. So I do my own podcast with my best friend Jill, and we look at the Point horror books. And she recently bought us both a copy of the like short story version. It's called like 13, and it's like 13 short stories by a lot of the Point horror writers. Mm-hmm. And when she gave it to me, I had this sudden, immediate, like nostalgic flashback, and like sort of snatched it out of her hands. And I went, "Oh my God, is this the one with the doll in it?" And I remembered that I had this book as a kid, And there is a short story in it called The Doll. And it was the first one, I think because it was by like my favourite author. I think it's by Carol Ellis. And so when I was a kid, I like flipped straight to this one and read it. And the story scared me so much that I never read any of the other stories in the book.
God.
And it just like left it on the shelf because The Doll scared me so much. And since she bought it for me, I have reread it and can attest to the fact that yes, it's very scary, although I don't think now it would stop me reading the rest of the stories.
I love that.
But yeah, there's something about dolls, right? Like I've been lucky enough that I've never had one that will kind of appear in a place that it's meant not to be, or it's like weird little head or eyes will kind of turn and look at me. Like, of course not. But yeah, there's something about those dead eyes and the fact that they kind of look like people but aren't people that is just very uncanny and very scary and weird.
Yeah, and I always used to, maybe influenced by Toy Story, used to wish desperately for my dolls to come alive. And I'm an only child, so maybe there was a little bit of like lonely kid needed a sibling type of thing.
Sure.
But I remember trying to trick them. Like I'd leave my room and fake the steps down the hallway and then open the door really quickly to see if they had moved.
That's so adorable.
But can I tell you about something actually creepy that happened one time?
Oh my God, yes, please.
Yes. So I had when I was a kid, I had a lot of trouble sleeping and had a lot of nightmares. But I had a favorite doll that wasn't actually shaped like a human. It was like a little mouse with these black button eyes and a little pink gingham skirt and bow on her ears.
Adorbs.
Adorable. And I used to call her Mushka. Sorry, it's coming out with like an English accent, but it was in Russian. So it was in translation Little Mouse because she was a little mouse. I was not very creative. And I used to go to sleep with her all the time. And even when I stopped sleeping with her as a kid, I sort of had her on a tall shelf in my room. And then one day, my parents used to leave me alone at home all the time because they worked late. So I get used to it very, very quickly and very early. And I'd stay up late reading Stephen King, Natch. Mm-hmm. And I heard this laugh. So this little doll, my little mouse, if you pressed her belly, she would make this laugh, which in hindsight, super fucking creepy because it was something really like something like really high pitched. And I'm sure it was meant to be cute. It wasn't. And I was in my room reading late at night. I was by myself in my parents' flat. And I heard that exact laugh, but coming from the kitchen, which was on the opposite end of where my room was.
Oh my God, fuck off.
And then I recognized it immediately as the laugh of my childhood doll. But I looked up and that doll was still on my high shelf in my room in front of me.
No.
Yes.
No, that's not okay. Did you go and investigate?
Fuck no.
Did you ever find
Fuck no. Because you know what, Becky? At this point, I had already seen Child's Play.
Okay, well, perfect. Just lock the doors.
I'm like, no, you fucking bitch, Chucky. You're not getting me. You're not pretending to be my mouse doll. I can see her. She would not do that to me. Also, she doesn't have thumbs, so there's no way she could hold a knife.
Opposable thumbs are very important when it comes to killer dolls, and unfortunately, Chucky has them.
So I'm super excited about this episode because I had not revisited Child's Play and the Chucky films for years. I had only revisited The Bride of Chucky, which we discussed a few years ago on this feed. But the original films and the subsequent transformed franchise and the TV series and the remake from 2009, where some of them were new to me and some of them I had watched at some point and but not for years. So we're going to get into Child's Play from 1988 and the Chucky family tree.
Yes.
So, as we begin, Becky, tell me about your own relationship with Child's Play and the Chucky films.
It's relatively recent.
Okay.
So I didn't watch them when I was younger. When I was younger, and I've said this on multiple podcasts, so I'm sorry if I'm repeating myself. I'm definitely repeating myself. But I didn't kind of do slashers when I was a younger horror fan. I watched more kind of like ghosts and kind of occult stuff, like creepy stuff, not so much with like the slasher killers. But I remember Child's Play being a kind of phenomenon, and, you know, kids in the playground talking about it, and that it was like a real kind of favourite amongst like kids. And I then watched the first one first. I kind of started at the beginning. A few years ago now, and immediately was like, yeah, I get it. Like, I get why this is such like an iconic, you know, Chucky is such an iconic character, and why it's such a big kind of like tentpole film sort of in the genre. And then since then, you know, I've just sort of worked my way through them. And we were chatting before you hit record, and I think that Child's Play is my favourite of the horror franchises, because it's just so consistent. And whenever I would watch a new one of the sequels that I hadn't watched before, first time watches, I'd be like, oh, it's time for Bride of Chucky, it's time for Seed of Chucky, etc., etc. I'd be like almost steeling myself for like, this will be the one where it goes downhill, this will be the bad one. And that kind of never really happened. Like, there are obviously peaks and troughs, as there are bound to be, but I think kind of quality wise, and just being able to put on any of the films even just in isolation to each other, like, you don't, you know, there is this kind of through line, but you can just watch them, like pop on Seed of Chucky or pop on Cult of Chucky or whatever, and they're just like super entertaining, really well made. Chucky is such a compelling character, and I love watching him. I love how much glee he takes in the murder, and they've obviously sort of built so much like lore and this universe around him. And I honestly think that out of all of the sort of big franchises, the Child's Play and the Chucky franchise just like never really misses for me.
I'm so happy to hear you say that, because I have a very different relationship with Chucky. I actually saw Child's Play. I think Child's Play was next to It. I think I might have seen them in the same day. Was one of those formative horror experiences. And again, I'm not going to repeat myself. I've spoken many times about how A Nightmare on Elm Street was my horror origin story. But when I was a little bit older, and this was living in Spain, maybe pre-teen wise, I had a friend who had a giant ass TV. And she had, like fucking huge, like maybe 60, 70 inches wide, you know? And
Whoa.
This is like the early 90s. So this was quite uncommon. And her parents were well into horror. They had like a really posh Ouija board. They used to play as a family, and they would sometimes invite me over to watch like horror films. And I think the first time she did that, she put on Child's Play, the first one from 88, and I was like transfixed. And then she put on It, and I had a nervous breakdown.
I'm not surprised.
No, fucking me neither. I'm still getting over it. But I told you before we hit record, over the past like 4 or 5 days, I have watched every single Chucky film in order.
What a week.
And let me tell you, Becky, I think this might be my new favorite horror franchise too, because I have had such a nice time. I cannot believe how consistently fun every single one of these films is.
Right.
I have a low tolerance for slashers. There's a reason why I haven't done them on the podcast as a series. I find them genuinely quite dull, with like a few, with the exception of the originals and a few choice exceptions. It's very formulaic. Child's Play, though, every single film is like it's a reboot, but
Right.
it isn't. And the fact that it evolves so much with the times, but at the same time has this consistent voice to it, literally, because Brad Dourif
Exactly.
always voices Chucky, and Don Mancini has always been involved. He's the creator of Chucky and has always been involved with the entirety of the franchise and all its iterations, except sort of, the remake, which had different screenwriter and different director. I am obsessed with how gleeful it is, how uninterested in being worthy it is, while at the same time being so empathetic and earnest in the horror sphere and in a horror language, being so inclusive. And also the fucking doll aspect of it all, just never giving that up. Never giving up the conceit. I'm like, you know what? Chucky has spent, 8 films trying to stop being a doll? He's never gonna give it up.
I know. He's in there now. He's used to it. You know,
Yeah.
he knows how that little body works and how he can kind of commit the highest level of destruction with it. And he uses it to his advantage as well. Like, there's so much, one of the great things about Chucky as a villain is that he's little, right? Like, he can hide under sofas, and he can sort of creep about, and he's also got this sort of built-in, especially over the first couple of films, before he's quite as brazen. But he's got this kind of built-in defense mechanism in that, because he's a doll and he can just kind of put himself on standby almost and just like become a doll again. Nobody ever believes Andy, or nobody believes, the mum or whoever. And so he's almost able to kind of operate with impunity, because he's got this classic thing where he can just be like, well, I'm a doll, and just sort of, become the rag doll again. It's perfect.
So let's talk first about the original Child's Play film from 1988. What do you think makes it so special? What was the thing that would birth this entire Chucky franchise that now spans films and TV?
Oh, wow. Like, I think it's this sort of perfect confluence of elements. Chucky, as we've already sort of discussed, is such a great character in that you've got Brad Dourif in the opening moments of the film where he is still Charles Lee Ray. And so you've kind of got that in your head that, he was a real life serial killer. This doll isn't like possessed by an evil spirit or something. It's like he was an actual guy. He was like the Lake Shore Strangler. And so when Brad Dourif's voice starts coming out of this doll, it's like you've kind of got this real person, this like real murderer in your head. And I think that adds like so much kind of threat to him. And then as the doll, those moments when he kind of like really like loses it and he becomes absolutely furious and livid and murderous, like the effects in the film, even though it's the earliest example, are already so good. The way that they mash up, whether it is point of view shots or whether it's like somebody dressed up and running around kind of in a long shot, or whether it is puppetry and animatronics, it all just, it's like seamless to kind of create this little like bastard little doll who is just out to, he's out on like a revenge mission as well. Like, I like that there is quite a nice tight plot of the first film. At first he's out on the revenge mission. He wants to get back at his partner who abandoned him at the store. He wants to get back at the cop who killed him. And then obviously it goes into him needing to get Andy because he needs to transfer his soul into the boy before he can't get out of the doll's body and, you know, he can kind of die. And so like that feels very tight. And all of the performances in it are strong. You know, they don't kind of muck about too much with like loads of backstory or just sort of dropped into these people's lives and then all of the kind of mayhem that ensues just because this nice mum wants to get her little boy the birthday present that he like just so desperately longs for. Yeah, I think between everything, like the really skilled direction, the casting, the like brutal kills that are really well directed, and like these real moments of kind of like shock and violence again from this, you know, what should be like this good guy, like this little sort of happy doll that's meant to be like a child's plaything, and it's just absolutely terrifying. And then there's a lot of humor that runs through it as well. So for me, it's just got kind of every element that you would want that sort of comes together really perfectly to make like an absolute like stellar first installment.
Well, this is what I love about it. And again, I had probably not rewatched the original Child's Play in like a decade, if not more. And I was riveted by it. It's not what I would call scary, but it's definitely creepy, especially by the use of POV and the little tippy-tappy of Chucky's little doll feet. Oh, disgusting. Because I could swear I could almost like hear them around me or above me. And it's very cleverly directed. As you say, it's a very tight story. Wastes no scenes. It absolutely full on tells us exactly who these characters are, who's Karen, who's Andy, who's Charles Lee Ray. They're very quickly and effortlessly characterized, and then bam, we're in the horror. And the way one of the things I love the most as well is how it calibrates when and how to reveal that it's the doll.
Yes,
because it takes some time, but not kind of in a negative sense, but it paces itself really well. And then when it does choose to reveal that the doll is actually alive, it's Chucky suddenly twisting his little doll face and going, "You fucking bitch!"
He's such a foul-mouthed little sod as well. Like, again, you know, this sort of discrepancy between this cute little plaything and like the absolute filth that comes out of his mouth. And as you say, like when he twists his face in that sort of furious rage. I mean, I agree, you know, it doesn't sort of scare me in the point that I'm sort of awake at night, but like those moments are really shocking.
I know, especially kind of if you, for some reason, go into Child's Play without knowing anything about Chucky, or if, you know, like me, you are a child. That's very impactful. If anything, I think this is a child-appropriate horror film. But, you know, I know nothing about children.
Well, no, I mean, me neither. I'm only talking about my own experience with horror. But I think if I had seen this when I was a kid, I would have loved it.
Yeah. And what do you think of, you know, and this is the reason why I kind of forced Chucky into this series, is because he is a doll possessed by the spirit of a serial killer, Charles Lee Ray. And continues, he is what I would call a devoted serial killer. He loves his job and he will not give it up. It is a vocation for him. And it turns out it runs in the family too. Yeah. What do you think of Brad Dourif's performance very briefly in at the beginning of Child's Play, but then as Chucky the doll throughout the rest of the franchise?
I mean, he's just perfect. You know, he was in an interview recently talking about the fact that he was going to retire from acting apart from Chucky, which I just love. Like, you know, he is the franchise. He is the doll. You know, we kind of we've been on this journey with him through this his voice coming out of this creepy little doll for so many years. And I don't think, he's a bit like Robert Englund when they have tried to move away. So like in the remake, and I know that they had Mark Hamill, which is an amazing, if you're going to have anybody else, if you want somebody to do a creepy voice, then Mark Hamill is your guy. But, he has stuck with this franchise and stuck with providing the voice and the personality and the absolute kind of just insanity and glee that is Chucky. When you hear that laugh come out of his mouth and the just in, like you say, like he enjoys his job, right? The absolute enjoyment, whether he is killing somebody with, I don't know, suffocating them with a plastic bag or slashing them or beating them to death with a ruler or whatever. That laugh that comes out of him, and it's the personality that Brad Dourif brings to the character that I think has been so kind of undeniable and like irresistible to audiences all these years.
And in the first and then the second Child's Play film, and even in the third, it's in the first 3 Child's Play films, but especially in the first one when we're first introduced to these characters, Chucky is throughout the whole movie trying to what's the word I'm looking for? Exchange bodies with a young kid called Andy, who he is gifted to. And then he becomes obsessed with Andy throughout the rest of the franchise, who, again, is always played by the same actor, Alex Vincent, from childhood to adulthood. So what do you think of Chucky's obsession with this one poor kid?
You put it so perfectly, this poor kid. Oh my god, there are so many moments, like especially in the first one, when he's so little and he's so cute and sweet, and those moments like when he gets locked in that hospital room with like bars on the windows and like he can't even he has to get on a chair to even look out of the window to sort of try and get the doctor's attention and things when Chucky's after him. Like, he's just so adorable. And I think it's like it's almost a bit like Sideshow Bob and Bart Simpson. Like, there's this kind of this absolute, like you say, just obsession. Like, after a while, Chucky kind of loses the kind of the practical desire to switch bodies, but he's always just got it out for this kid. Like, he was the first person who he revealed himself to, and like he's just never kind of lost that. And again, like, it's one of those brilliant kind of tactics that Don Mancini and the franchise uses to just bring this like continuity all the way through it. It's not just Chucky every film going through a load of random bystanders. Like, I love that they kind of anchor it in this just complete fixation on poor Andy.
I mean, he just destroys his entire life.
Completely just wrecks it.
There's a line he says, which is kind of uncharacteristic of the sassiness of the later Chucky films, but there's a line where he says, I killed his childhood. I'm like, you know what, Chuck? Yeah, it's in The Curse of Chucky in 2013. And I'm like, you know what, Chuck? You're right. This is the worst thing you've ever done. You've just hounded this poor kid, orphaned him. He was already in the first movie. He's the child of a single mom. She buys this Chucky, this good guy doll from a homeless man who's selling him behind the terrible kind of posh a mall where she works, where she's really put upon. She buys this doll so her kid can be happy because he's literally dressing up as a good guy doll.
And he watches the cartoons. Yes. And he's got as soon as he walks through the door, he wants to run to the TV because Good Guys is on, and he's absolutely obsessed with this little doll and these like this property, you know, like when kids do get completely obsessed with something. Like nowadays it's probably like Paw Patrol or Bluey or something like that, but you know, for Andy, Good Guy is like his absolute obsession is like this tiny little boy, and it just turns around on him and completely ruins his life.
And also he is so alone all the time. His mother's working, he's this only child kid, doesn't have a second parent. He wants a friend, and he believes in Chucky so much that then, like, you know, imagine if a doll you just got starts speaking to you, you'd be like so happy. And then he starts murdering people and blaming you for it. Like, what the fuck, Chuck? And no one believes him. And you sort of said a thing earlier that I think you suddenly made me realize why maybe I really felt for this character. I'm not the biggest fan of like kids in horror movies. They tend to be quite annoying. Andy is so sweet.
I know.
He's such a sweet little kid. I'm like,
and Alex Vincent is such a great actor. Like literally from that first movie, it's not even like he sort of had to, you know, he took a couple of movies to warm up. Like the Harry Potter kids, you know, he's so good, like from the word go, and like your heart just absolutely breaks for him.
I know, and he's never the same. Even in the second film, Andy is put in the system. He's put in foster care, and he's like a broken shell. He creates this like bond with his foster sister, who's a bit more of who's older, who's a teenager. She's about to be kind of put out to pasture anyway. She's about to turn 18. How does Andy then like navigate the world after the first Child's Play?
Oh my God, there's this absolutely tragic like interaction between Kyle, his foster sister, and Andy in that second movie when he realizes that his foster dad specifically like doesn't want to put up with his shit and basically wants to send him back to the home, and they're him and his wife Jenny Agutter Love are like fighting in the other room. Andy is just like desolate, sitting alone on his bed. And Kyle comes in and she says, you know, I've been in and out of foster homes my whole life. What you have to realize is that you can't rely on anyone but yourself. And like this tiny child, like imagine having to come to that realization at such a young age. And he just kind of, you know, after the second film, he goes to like military school, basically. And then by the time you catch up with him in adulthood, it just feels like his entire life has been consumed by the sort of horrific events that happened to him as a young child. And he's just never gotten over it. He's never escaped it, and is just like, again, just sort of like fixated on it. It feels like it's kind of all he's got because he just never really had a chance to have a normal life.
And you know, what do you think kind of broadly of those first two sequels before the Child's Play franchise became the Chucky franchise?
So 2, I think, is basically a perfect horror sequel. It just does everything that it needs to do. It picks up right at the end of the first film. So Andy's mum, lovely mum from the first one, has been basically sectioned because she refuses to like deny, you know, his event, like his interpretation of events. And so they've basically gone like, okay, well, you're obviously crazy, and so put her away, and this is why he ends up in foster care. And the police have kind of like swept it under the carpet, and you just pick up straight away with Chucky like having to find his way back to Andy after being put back together and fixed at the Good Guys factory. And it's just this perfect next step in a franchise, a perfect horror sequel. Like, even if they'd stopped at 2, I think that would have just been a perfect, like, 1-2, because it sort of ramps everything up a bit. The kills come a little bit earlier. They're a little bit more kind of brutal and graphic. There's a few more of them. You get a bit more kind of expansion in the universe. You learn more about where the good guys are made. Andy has interactions with like a wider group of people, but still it's kind of carrying on this tried and tested formula of Chucky trying to get back to Andy because he needs to be he needs to sort of do the ritual and get like his soul into his body. So for me, I mean, Child's Play 2 is just an absolute banger, and I think it's a perfect sequel. 3, I personally think, is the weakest of the franchise, and I am not the hugest fan of it. I haven't seen it in a while because I'm not the hugest fan of it, so it isn't one that I revisit. So I can't necessarily tell you all the reasons that I don't think it works. I just think that it misses a lot of the kind of, a little bit of the sort of magic of the first ones. And yeah, I don't know, like I think it's quite common that out of most of the Child's Play and Chucky films, that 3 is often kind of criticised as being a bit weaker.
It's interesting. I agree with you. Child's Play 2 is phenomenal, especially in terms of how gory it gets, but towards Chuck. He gets his legs melded together, he gets burned, melted, his entire face turns into goo, and then he gets exploded. So like it has an absolute field day with him. And then my favorite thing about Free is that it sort of feels like an in-between, like a bridge between 2 very distinct eras of the Chucky lives, of the Chucky franchise. The first 2 are out and out horror films. They're fun, but they're designed to be gory and scary and upsetting. And then starting with, I'd argue, with Bride of Chucky, and very much so with Seed of Chucky later on, and the series, they're really incorporating the dark humor. They're being funny. Chucky has so many zingers and one-liners. Kind of his really kind of dirty old man sense of humor really comes to the forefront. And 3 has a bit of both. There's the thing where it starts in this smoky gray boardroom where the board of the company that makes the good guys is like, we need to bring them back because children are just consumers in training. And then they reopen this factory and you get this amazing opening credit sequence of like Chucky's being built, and I found it so upsetting. Like, I don't like it at all. And you get this like melted down, dusty, decrepit like doll corpse that is then recycled into Chucky again, and you're like, fucking hell, throw it in the bin.
Have you people learned nothing?
Literally. And then it's got these like really strange flourishes, like this overly enthusiastic barber who cuts the boy's hair in the military academy where Andy is sent as a teenager, and he like keeps Polaroids of the boys with strands of their hair on his walls. I'm like, what is this going? Wow. What is happening there? So I like that we stay with Andy. He is the lifeline of the Child's Play movies as much as Chuck is. And then with the 4th one onwards, the name changes. It becomes Chucky. It's not Child's Play. There's really no longer children involved as much, and Andy kind of goes away until he turns up a lot later as an adult. But I agree. I enjoyed it because it just felt like a really strange film. But once I had seen the next ones, once I revisited the next ones, I'm like, okay, this is where you're trying out things. This is where the shift is happening into more of the horror comedy realm where Chucky exists pretty much since Bride of Chucky, I'd say. And there's this great zinger where he goes, "Don't fuck with the Chuck."
so good. And again, like, these lines, like, they're so absurd, but like somehow the delivery by Brad Dourif just makes them like they just work so perfectly, and have you like howling and also like kind of respecting Chucky for just sticking with his shtick, you know.
Mm-hmm. And you know, as I've watched them so close together, it's really noticeable how there's these distinct periods or eras in the Chucky franchise. You know, there's the outright horror of Child's Play 1, 2, arguably 3. Then we get into kind of this queer horror comedy era with Bride of Chucky, with Seed of Chucky, and then they go full meta horror comedy.
Yeah.
Do you have a preference yourself for kind of one period of the Chucky franchise or another? And do you think that this shifting tone is the thing that's ensured the franchise has kept fresh and so enjoyable?
Oh God, I mean, yeah, to answer that first, yes, I absolutely think that the shifting tone has given it that kind of longevity. You know, there are franchises that have kind of stayed with the tried and tested formula, even when they sent Jason to space. You know, it was still like, it's still a Friday the 13th film. Same with Halloween, you know, in all of that, in all of its different iterations. But yeah, you're right, it does have these kind of three distinct styles that you follow, and then obviously you go the sort of meta side of things, then follows through into the series, and which just blows everything out of the water and just goes so big and, you know, like crazy. I think my favorite, oh God, that's a really hard question. I love all of the aspects, to be honest, and I think that the kind of journey from outright horror through the kind of campness of Bride and Seed, and the kind of that focus on like really, you know, issues, I guess, that weren't really being tackled quite so overtly necessarily in the era in horror in other films and franchises, and then through to like, it's such clever writing when they start doing the meta stuff, and you know, Jennifer Tilly playing herself and playing Tiffany, and then by the time you get to the series, that is just like, honestly, it makes you go cross-eyed with like who's in what body, who is who, what is up, down, I don't even know. But yeah, I mean, I think that it just works, and it's been really smart, that kind of evolution. And as you made the point earlier about how each of the films or each of the eras like seem to really kind of tap into what's going on around it, like even if that's in like pop culture or kind of in the wider world. You know, it seems like they are really like thinking about it, and you know, putting a lot of like heart and effort into keeping it fresh and keeping it going, and it doesn't feel like as cynical, I guess, as some franchises do.
You know what, you're completely right. And even as you were saying that it doesn't feel cynical, I'm like, this is a franchise where a doll jerks off into a tube and inseminates Jennifer Tilly, playing Jennifer Tilly, so that she can carry his twin babies. I love Tiffany. I know you do too, because we've spoken about The Bride of Chucky.
I absolutely do.
But I loved when with The Bride of Chucky and then with Seed of Chucky, Chucky became a family man. He reconnected with his bride, with his ex, and then they had some fun doll times and had a baby.
Mm-hmm.
What do you think Tiffany and then Glenn and Glenda bring to the Chucky franchise?
Like, it's so absurd. Like, they basically give him a little family, but like the most messed up kind of dysfunctional family, because, you know, if you don't want two people breeding, it's two messed up serial killers. And if you then got them in like dolls' bodies, and they have to kind of reckon with the fact of like, okay, so we're gonna have her able to get pregnant, and then at the end of Bride, you know, she gives birth to like this little gnashing thing that literally the first thing that it does when it comes out of her is kill somebody. They bring like Tiffany and Glenn bring this extra kind of characterization element to the franchise. Like, I do wonder if it would have started to get a little bit stale, or where they would have kind of gone with Chucky if he kind of didn't have them to give him something more to do. Like, would it just be more of the same, more of him just on a murderous rampage? Like, they kind of bring this extra element where he's never going to be a family man, right? He's never going to kind of settle down and put down the knife and be this loving father. But what they do is they kind of give the story and the character of Chucky like somewhere else to go and something else to explore. And on top of that, they just bring like these two hilarious, brilliant characters like within their own rights. Like, Tiffany is iconic. You know, God. Like one of my absolute favorite horror characters of all time. Like, you know, I like her more than Chucky, of course I do. She's incredible. And you know, she gets some amazing lines. And you know, Jennifer Tilly, you get more time with Jennifer Tilly in Bride of Chucky than you did with Brad Dourif in Child's Play before he turns into the doll. And you know, she's so incredible on screen. Like, she looks so amazing, she's so magnetic. But then again, like they did with Charles Lee Ray and the Chucky doll, then with Tiffany and the Tiff doll, they've just perfectly like transplanted this nutcase into like this tiny little body. And like when she does like her self makeover and she's like, Bobby, eat your heart out, like literally I like air punch every time. Like, I just love her so much.
I just love that. There's two things that just make me giggle about the addition of Tiffany and then Glenda. Yeah. One is very kind of devastating, which is like, you build an entire franchise on torturing this poor kid and orphaning him and sectioning his mom and just like setting him on a life where nobody believes what he's saying and what happened to him, and it's so heavily publicized that everybody knows and everybody thinks that he's a liar or demented. And at the same time, you've got this like savage serial killer who has made himself immortal by existing as a doll just so he can continue killing, basically. And he gets a great marriage. He gets a hot girlfriend who he then also turned into a doll. Yeah. And then they also, despite being deranged, bloodlusty serial killers, the both of them, there's a scene in Seed of Chucky with just like making out covered in someone's blood, and it like goes on for so long. I'm like, I don't want to look at doll sex. I don't want to. But then they're like the most loving parents.
I know.
I know. Also, Glenn/Glenda is how it's kind of presented on in coverage of the film. Is a doll born out of two supernaturally possessed serial killer dolls, and they're kind of suffering from gender dysphoria, and it's presented in the goddamn 5th movie of the Chucky franchise, and this was in 2004. This was 20 years ago. Yeah. And it was more progressive and more inclusive and more empathetic towards how that might feel for a character than anything else that was going on in 2004 or even today. I love Glenda so much because...
Me too. I love them. And like, just that conversation, that it's just so kind of matter of fact and out there. The conversation that they have with Chucky and Tiff about their gender. And it's like, I think I want to be a boy, but being a girl would be nice too. I'm not sure. Sometimes I feel like a boy. Sometimes I feel like a guy, like a girl. Can I be both? It's like, yes you can.
And then in the series, in like the first or the second episode, Chucky is like, I have a kid. They're gender fluid. I was like, yes, that's right.
I know. And doesn't he say something like, I'm not a monster? It's like, sure, I will kill people in any of the most brutal and inventive ways I can possibly come up with, and I will love it. And I will laugh, and, you know, I will do it over and over and over again. This is my raison d'etre, but I will not be judgmental about my
about queer
my child. Exactly.
Oh, you gotta love Chucky.
I know.
Despite everything. And one of the most notable things as well, it's obviously the Chucky doll itself, which goes in the very first film. It's kind of this beatific, very doll-like little ginger creature, and then his face twists at very choice moments. That then changes significantly as it progresses. What do you think of the way that the design of Chucky has evolved over the decades?
Oh my god, like he so outwardly comes to kind of embody like what's going on inside, right? Like when he's been just torn apart at the end of 3, and Tiff has to basically sew him all together and like reanimate him in Bride of Chucky. Like when he's suddenly got all of those like huge stitches and scars, and his face looks like it's just sort of being held together. Like that for me in my head, like if I think of Chucky, the first image of his face that comes to mind is when he's all kind of like scarred and, you know, stitched together.
Yeah,
because like I say, like
his eyeball with no eyelid on it.
Yes, yeah, exactly. Yeah, love it. Like, you know, that is, as I say, like it kind of it sort of shows outwardly like the kind of monstrous personality that he actually has. And while you lose a little bit of that that kind of contrast I get that is so entertaining throughout the first few films, when it is like, as you say, this beatific little sweet looking little thing that is then saying these like really filthy like swear words and like awful kind of misogynistic stuff, and you know, literally like killing everybody that he comes across. Like that's such a perfect contrast that it's being done by this tiny cute little object, but there is something just so iconic about it when he sort of later on is all just like gnarled and stuff. I love it.
And the thing that's like the not annoyed but definitely caught my attention is how this happens in the later films, right? In 2013 I was kind of taken aback by the fact that all of a sudden his face changed. This is in Curse of Chucky. And so it's sort of the penultimate film in the franchise. And suddenly Chucky has this brand new designed, like completely polished new face. And first of all, I found him very upsetting, just even in the kind of the polite face. I'm like, oh, this is not vintage Chuck. I don't like this. This looks weird. This doesn't look like Chucky. He looked a little bit too much like a child. I was like, it's too Megan. I don't like it. But then I loved when they sort of peeled away the plastic, and underneath you get back to the gnarled, scarred Chucky. And also I loved the hair thing. So in the first 3 movies, he has this like very dull, like ginger wig, right? It's all choppily cut. In the Bride of Chucky and then Seed of Chucky, maybe because Tiffany like sews him back together, but it looks like he has sort of a very intense widow's peak. So
Yes.
he's like, oh, this is like middle-aged man Chucky.
Yeah. I wish that he like developed like a little dad bod as well to go with it.
Well, can we I wasn't planning on asking this, but I think that unfortunately this is how I'm wired. And the films keep reminding us on the fact that both Chucky and Tiffany are anatomically correct.
Mm-hmm.
How do you feel about all the doll sex we get?
I mean, the fact that it gives us the lines, "Have you got a rubber?" And then he says something like, "Baby, I'm all rubber." Like, just the scripting, please. Chef's kiss. Absolutely perfect. And like, I love that that like first like sex scene between them, and it's like, it's all kind of done in like silhouette kind of in front of like a roaring fire. Like, it's the most romantic thing ever. And it's like these two little rubber sort of abominations like going at it. Yeah, I mean, I'm weirdly here for it.
I mean, and then when he jerks off and he's like, help me out, baby. And Tiffany shows him her plastic boobs. And then he jerks off to an issue of Fangoria with like a zombie woman on the cover. I just love the commitment to the bit.
Yes, exactly.
It's like, you know what? We gave you doll sex in Bride of Chucky, but you know what would just edge you? Like, just take it up a little notch. It's like, we're going to show you the body parts. We're going to show you what turns them on, and it's going to be a zombie woman. And you know what else? We're going to get John Waters to take pictures of it.
Oh my God. Yes. Yes. I mean, come on. There must have been so many like people watching that film who have jerked off to Fangoria who are like, yeah, he's my people. I love seeing myself represented on screen.
Listeners, have you ever jerked off to Fangoria or any other horror magazine by that? Please drop me an email. hello@thefinalgirls.co.uk. Let me know. So we've brought up his name a couple of times, but the entire franchise was obviously created and continues to be shepherded and led by Don Mancini. Mm-hmm. He wrote co-wrote the first one, and then has written every single other film of the franchise except the 2019 reboot, and directed the last three, starting with Seed of Chucky. Where do you see his imprint, and where do you think he feels different, or do you think he's managed the franchise differently from other original creators of massive horror franchises?
I think it, like, again, coming back to the consistency is just like undeniable. You know, it does have this consistent voice that, as you said, you know, as well as Brad DeReeves, you know, we've got Don Mancini just at the helm of this whole universe, this whole story, and he's obviously got such a clear vision of where he wants these characters to go and what he wants to do with the story. And, you know, I'm not sure that he's necessarily got one of those kind of pin boards with loads of, you know, red string all over it that he's kind of been planning since 1988. But unlike other franchises, which, you know, have gone through multiple directors, multiple writers, you know, some might be directors for hire, he's just always kind of been there at the core of it. And I think it's just invaluable for kind of like, you know, as we've already sort of alluded to, Child's Play is one of the strongest of the franchises and definitely kind of the most consistent in terms of its storytelling. And I don't think that's that's possible if you haven't just got, you know, this singular visionary, this singular voice kind of steering it along. And then also, you know, he's got an amazing relationship with the actors that he works with. And, you know, I think you can tell that there is something about the longevity of the franchise that's kind of centered around those relationships. You know, they seem to have a lot of fun making these films and just sort of want to keep working together and keep telling these stories. And then, you know, on top of all of that, he's got, you know, he's a queer man himself. And so this being one of the kind of queerest franchises in horror, if not the queerest franchises in horror, you know, so much of that kind of comes from him sort of, I guess, wanting to represent LGBTQ kind of issues on screen, and, you know, and not even like sort of ramming it down your throat or being really earnest about it, but like finding a way to be really kind of like fun and camp and like vicious with it all as well. You know, you don't sort of necessarily come to the Chucky or Child's Play films looking for, you know, these messages around kind of queerness, but they're in there, just like kind of like laced into their DNA. And I think that's something like absolutely vital that he brings to them.
Absolutely. And I think, you know, he's said many times that was very deliberately placed into the film, very much inspired from his own experiences and how he as a gay man has experienced horror throughout his life. And obviously the main focus point for that is Glenn and Glenda, which he has said is a character that will return in the future. So I'm hoping they will.
Get Billy Boyd on the phone.
Hell yeah. And let's talk a little bit about the actors, because we've spoken about Brad Dourif, but also I do love that he has maintained this relationship with his actors. Dourif consistently voicing Chucky across so many films and the TV show, which is now in its 4th series. Jennifer Tilly, who continues to play Tiffany. And also now Dourif's daughter, Fiona, who also has a recurring character on the TV show that came out of Curse of Chucky, I believe. Cult of Chucky?
Yeah, I get Curse and Cult mixed up. But yes,
Curse of Chucky,
yes. You're right, yeah.
What do you think that this consistency of the actors, and I guess specifically Jennifer Tilly and Alex Vincent, who plays Andy, and Fiona to a newer degree, even my fave Devon Sawa, who I did not know was in the show until I started watching it.
What a yummy surprise!
My God, 12-year-old Anna was having a very good time. What do you think kind of the consistency of these actors playing these roles over so many years kind of brings to our experience as viewers?
I guess just like any actor that returns to a role time and time again, they just have this kind of, they develop this natural shorthand, this they kind of embody these characters so well that when you then want to take a character in a different direction or try something like new or inventive or fun with them, you know, especially when you are telling these kind of meta stories, when, you know, they might have a different soul in their body, or they might be playing themselves in this one, or they might be playing themselves and a doll, or, you know, whatever. Like, it's all very kind of mixed up and complicated. But if you're developing these relationships with actors that continue throughout all of these films and TV show as well, you know, they've just got this kind of limitless like well to kind of draw upon. And I think that, you know, that really adds something. You're not kind of shoehorning a new face into an established role, or expecting somebody to kind of catch up. You know, they've just got it all there to draw upon at all times. And, you know, I think also they must have, you know, a sort of very, like, a lot of familiarity with each other, being on set together all the time. And again, like, that just sort of that natural interaction between them and that shorthand, it means that the audience isn't always sort of having to adapt, you know, to somebody new, or to somebody who's sort of trying to embody something that's been played by a different character in the past. It's all just the same people, and you know, that just brings like a level of sort of quality and consistency that then makes for the audience this sort of more like accessible and enjoyable experience, I think.
There's also, I reckon, like an element of mutual fandom, like of this reciprocity that goes, because you mentioned this before, Durif pretty much saying that he's retiring from acting except for Chucky.
Yeah.
The fact that someone like Alex Vincent has consistently come back to this character, this role, Fiona Durif kind of working on this, and she's a pretty accomplished actress in her own right as well. So committing to this franchise that is so associated with her father too. Jennifer Tilly, another kind of iconic character actress, coming back to this over and over again. I think the fact that these actors enjoy working on these films and TV shows so much that they will continue giving as long as they have something to give, I think creates this sense of like, you love watching us do this and we love making them.
Yeah,
which
absolutely.
is, you know, not to like get too corny, but like you rarely get to experience that mutual joy where you're like, oh, you are as committed to this franchise and these characters as I am, and we're gonna continue in this like little merry-go-round of gruesome killer dolls, because you know what, it's fun to watch, and it kind of has this giddiness that I think makes us more forgiving as audiences. Like, there's a lot of, you know, we'll forgive when you have a tacky de-aging of Brad Dourif because you want to like show Charles Lee Ray again in the cult of Chucky. We'll forgive kind of low budgets or bad wigs or whatever, because you know what? Everybody's game. And if everybody's game and has been game for so long, I think at least the experience of watching these, I'm like, I'm up for anything. Like, Don Mancini, you want to, like, whatever you want to throw on the screen, I'm going to lap it up, because you know what? You've already proven over 20 years that, more than that, you're just having a nice time. And there's ideas and there's thought behind it, but there's such a genuine and contagious joy for this character that has not run away from him. You know, he's kind of, I think, kind of followed with what the true line of where he stands as a creative is. And you can see that kind of in the explicit queer storylines, in the way that characters interact with the world as well. The themes, especially around Andy in the first two films, the isolation of that poor boy. But then as Chucky has become his own brand and his own huge franchise thing, I think he's really lent into what works for fans. And
Definitely.
Yeah.
Yeah, definitely. And, you know, they're very good at the kind of PR machine as well. Like, you get these kind of like behind the scenes things on like social media of Don Mancini and Jennifer Tilly like in the bath together, and you know, lovely interviews with Brad and Fiona Dourif, and you kind of get this impression that like they're loving the opportunity to work together. And I think in that interview where he was talking about his retirement, I think he even said, like, to be honest, I'll keep coming back, like, for Fiona, like, for my daughter. Like, you know, I mean, imagine having that sort of lovely opportunity. And
so
also this kind of like really weird, it must be such a odd sort of sensation or experience, because, you know, at points she actually like gets made up like Charles Lee Ray plays her dad, like playing this character and stuff. Like, it's such a kind of intimate thing. And yeah, I completely agree. Like, you very much get the impression, whether that is on screen or off screen, with all of their sort of very savvy marketing, that they do just love working together. And I think that does engender a certain amount of kind of loyalty from audiences.
Did you watch the 2019 remake of Child's Play? Because that is the one time where that ensemble of Dom Mancini, Brad Dourif, Fiona Dourif, Jennifer Tilly, etc. has kind of been split apart, and it's an entirely different team. And Mark Hamill, as we mentioned before, is the one who voices Chucky.
I have seen it. So I've only seen it once when it first came out. So it's been, you know, a good 5 years since I've seen it. But I remember having a lot of fun with it. You know, I really remember, like, there are a couple of like really kind of standout kills. Like, there's definitely one with a lawnmower, which was like, stays with me to this day.
Very good.
Really good. But, you know, I liked that they kind of brought it up to date in 2019 with Chucky almost kind of being like, I think he sort of almost goes like online, like there's an app, and, you know, sort of, there's this sort of like AI sort of conceit to the proceedings, which I thought was, you know, sort of quite interesting. And he does like nothing's ever gonna touch the kind of original creation, and I'm really happy that actually the Child's Play remake didn't then birth a load of its own spin-offs. I'm glad that it kind of exists independently, and then, you know, Mancini and the team have come back and kind of done so much more with the property and the franchise, like post 2019, because I think that is absolutely the right way to go. But as a little standalone remake, I think a lot of it works. And I think, yeah, as I said earlier, like, if you are going to try and replace anybody like Brad Dourif and that incredible performance that he gives, and also like the familiarity that audiences have with him, you know, an actor like Mark Hamill, who has, you know, done such incredible voice work, like on the Joker in the Batman cartoons and stuff. He's so good at kind of embodying that like manic evil, like through his work of the Joker. So I think that he was really good casting as the new Chucky. But yes, like I say, it's like one and done. Yeah, it's very different, one and done, and I'm glad that Mancini and crew are back kind of doing their thing.
Yeah, I think I watched it last night for the first time, and I've sort of always been a little bit allergic to kind of, you know, let's reboot a franchise that doesn't need rebooting. Well, you know, at this point, the Chucky TV series had not launched, I believe, so maybe it was a little bit of a need of a reboot, but it's fine as a standalone, and Mark Hamill is very good, as he always is, particularly with voice acting, but it is going for something very different. On the one hand, there is an Andy Barclay, he's got also a single mom who works in a retail job, and there's that whole similar angle to it, but there's no Charles Lee Ray. It's all AI. And so the kind of conceit really changes. There's really not a personality to Chucky in the same way. He becomes obsessed with Andy because he sort of imprints on him. And the whole explanation for his evil is because he is programmed to have no safety measures by a disgruntled factory worker in Vietnam, which is where the dolls are made. So it's a lot more about like consumerism and how we're and there's like, it's the buddy dolls, right? And they have like 3 different buddy dolls throughout the duration of the movie. And, you know, people, same as like with a new iPhone, they're like, oh, I want the new one, so I'm going to throw away and dispose of the perfectly fine previous one that I bought 6 months ago. And there is this, I'm not sure if you remember this, there's this demonic looking furry version of the Buddy doll.
I don't remember that.
It looks like a little bear, but in the shape of like a child, I guess, with the little overalls and stuff. I'm like, listen, I bet if there was any furries working on set, they absolutely commandeered that prop. But the thing that really did not gel with me at all is the design of Chucky. It has, I don't know if you remember this, but I found him, first of all, inherently creepy because they gave him like this very obscenely strong jaw.
Yes, yes.
And I'm like, what the fuck is this? Do you know what it reminded me of? What was that guy? Oh my God, it was Troy from Futurama.
Yeah.
Do you remember him? It was like this parody of like a hyper masculine creation with like this jutting huge jaw. And I'm like,
and this like really square chin.
Yeah. I'm like, what the fuck is this? Is this supposed to be like a companion for a child? A doll? Are you joking? This
No,
looks
you're so right. It does look so
wrong.
weird. And like his hair is kind of like swept back. It's like,
yeah,
it looks a little bit like they've tried to make Chucky sexy, and I am not on board. It's like you say, like this is meant to be a child's toy, and the perfect thing about the original Chucky design is that it is like this sweet little sort of like, you know, it's not, I know it's weird, and he almost looks too human, but at the same time, like that doesn't have that sort of like sweetness of like the sort of that sort of uncanniness of like a doll, you know, like a sweet doll that then suddenly turns evil. Like he looks evil from day one.
Yeah. And like his eyes glow red, and I'm like, I don't need that. That's just like a little creepy robot. That's Megan,
exactly.
You know?
Yeah.
Like I love about the original Chucky conceit is that, this is an evil man possessing a doll.
Yes.
So it is ultimately still a serial killer. Now he's just in a different body, but he's still gonna be murdering.
Exactly. It's not just like a malfunctioning machine, which is basically what they do in the 2019 thing. Yeah.
So, and we should talk a little bit about the Chucky TV series, which now is in its 4th season, like I mentioned. I have to admit, and I've told you this before, I was a little sniffy about it. I'm a little sniffy about kind of prequel series or TV series that are adapted of existing horror franchises, or any franchises for that matter. And I have been proven wrong several times, including by the Chucky TV series.
Oh my God.
And I told you this before we hit record, because I was maybe thinking of cramming maybe one season or a few episodes to be able to talk about it. And I didn't do that because I loved the first episode so much that I'm just going to leisurely watch this show.
I love this for you so much. I love it. Yeah, I mean, I'm a big fan, so I'm not completely up to date, because as far as I'm aware, season 3 hasn't been made available in the UK yet. It's just been showing in the States, and seasons 1 and 2 have been. So that's what I've watched, and I love it. I love how just confident and brazen and batshit crazy it is, but it also like really leans into like the queer storytelling and that meta stuff that, you know, they kind of experimented with the later films has really kind of ramped up in the series. So everybody is in, you know, different bodies, and, you know, who knows, you know, like I said earlier, you kind of go cross-eyed with it, but it still got that like that creative core at the center of it. And again, I think with what we were saying about Don Mancini's kind of vision for this universe and this story, like it wouldn't have worked if you didn't have him helming it and like steering it, you know, in this like really confident and assured way that he is, because it would just be too crazy. But even when it feels like it's going to go off the rails, he somehow just about manages to kind of like steer it back onto the rails. So I am super excited for you to leisurely watch this show and please report back.
So how does it, without giving me too many spoilers, how does it expand the lore of Chucky?
So you get, God, it's so, honestly, Anna, it's so complicated. You just kind of have to watch it. But you get, like, Charles is in, like, Fiona DeReef's body. And like he'll sort of like take her over, so she'll be her some of the time and then him some of the time. And then you've got Jennifer Tilly as Jennifer Tilly, but then she's also Tiffany, and you've got you've got Andy, and also Kyle comes back, so Christina Leese comes back as Kyle. So you've got those two kind of like on the case, and as you say, like with Devon Sawa, like he then plays like multiple characters kind of across the seasons, but then at the center of it you've got like these sort of three key teens who have encountered the doll and, you know, are sort of trying to navigate being like adolescents, because they're sort of they're obviously much older than Andy was in the first film, so it has got much more of like a teen bent to it. And then also with Glenn and Glenda, like they become like real people, and like honestly, Anna, like I'm not making sense
so
because it doesn't make a lot of sense, but then it also makes sense when you're watching it.
I love it. I'm so excited. I've watched 2 episodes already and I am sold. Also in the very first episode, there's a little teenage kid who has a podcast about true crime in his town. It's so cute.
Adorable.
I love it. And before we wrap up, let's pick out some favorites. So, do you have any favorite Chucky zingers from the entire franchise?
Ooh, so I've already said like a couple of them. So definitely like Baby I'm All Rubber, I think is incredible. And actually you sort of highlighted one earlier, which isn't really a zinger, but I think for me is probably like one of the most like standout lines in the whole like franchise, which is the first time Chucky comes to life and attacks the mum in the first film, and he says, "You stupid bitch, you filthy slut, I'll teach you to fuck with me," and he's like screaming it in her face with this angry little face, and he's like kicking and screaming, and it is just like such an impactful transformation.
I said talk to me, damn it, or else I'm gonna throw you in the fire!
You stupid bitch, you filthy slut! Did you fuck with me?
Of, you know, like, fine, you've kind of had the impression that there's something going on with him and he's been sort of whispering to Andy and you've seen his little POV and, you know, pushing people out of windows and blowing up houses and stuff, like, fine. But that moment, you stupid bitch, you filthy slut, he goes... Oh my god, it's just amazing.
I just love it. I just love it because it's still coming out of his little doll body with the, with the cranky man voice. I love it.
There's also also in the first film, and like you can tell that these are the ones that have kind of come to mind because these are the two that I've watched like in prep, and they're the ones that I've seen most recently. But I love the bit when Chucky is in the lift and the old couple are in the lift and they're like, oh, some kids like left their doll behind, and as they leave the lift, the old lady goes, oh, like, what an ugly doll or something. And he just, as the lift, like, goes up, he just goes, fuck you.
Look, George, some child left their doll in the elevator.
Now leave it alone. Whoever left it there will come back looking for it.
Ugly doll.
Fuck you.
He's so vain.
I know, he is so vain.
I think one of my favorites, and like there's just so many, but some of the ones that I sent you over, well, I've already said the "Don't fuck with the Chuck" from Child's Play 3, just because it was like, it's so out of nowhere. I was like, how is this? Who are you saying this to, Chucky?
Don't fuck with the Chuck.
Oh my god.
But I loved also in Child's Play 2 when I don't fully remember the scene where he is, but I made a note and laughed out loud where he was like, "Goddamn women drivers!"
That's right! It's after Kyle has, like, she puts her seatbelt on and slams on the brakes, so he, like, flies through the windshield.
And then also, like, the zingers really go up as the franchise progresses and it becomes a lot more overtly comedy.
Expect.
Yeah, but there's one in Cult of Chucky, which is the last feature film that's been made, where he says, "I am a vintage mass-market children's story from the 80s standing right in front of you holding a scalpel." Because someone is still denying his existence. He's like, "How much more do I need to do to prove to you that I'm gonna murder you right in your face?"
I also, like, I can't bring any specific lines to mind, but I love it when Chucky, like, interacts with other good guy dolls.
Yes.
So, like, in Cult, I think it is, when you get, like, loads of them and they've all got, like, different hair and, like, different little personalities because he's, like, fractured his soul between a load of different dolls. And I love it when they interact and they're, like, fighting over who's gonna kill the person. And there's a bit in Child's Play 2 where he comes across the Tommy doll.
Yeah,
and, he, like, Tommy starts talking, he just goes, "Shut up, you idiot." Like,
and this is kind of a nonsensical one, but in Child's Play 2019, the remake, when he kills the dude by slicing off his face with the lawnmower and the guy's toupee flies out of the lawnmower, Chucky just goes, "This is for Tupac."
This is for Tupac.
I don't. What?
what?
What? What?
What's why? It's not like a toupee pun or something. I have no idea what that is about.
Me either. And I've got it in my notes, so I know. And I watched it last night, and I remember thinking, "Wait, what? Is this a toupee pun? What is happening? How does this doll know who Tupac was?"
Right, exactly. I mean, yeah, I don't know. I have no explanation for that.
But then also, again, I've only seen like 2 episodes of the TV series, but very much in the vein of Seed of Chucky, I love it when he's sitting down with this kid and, you know, the kid is like, "Oh my god, you're murdering people." And he's like, "You know what? Accidents happen more often than murder, and way more often than murders committed by supernaturally possessed dolls." I'm like, that is so rational.
Exactly. He's so self-aware.
And how would you overall, what would be your ranking of the franchise? What are your favorites in order?
Okay. All right. Well, I prepared this, so I've got it to hand. So, not including the remake, which I'd put down the bottom just out of,
yes.
I think it's probably better than some, but like objectively, it's probably better. But I'm excluding it. So,
fair.
Out of the 7 main films, I'm gonna go Child's Play 3 at number 7, Cult of Chucky at number 6, Curse of Chucky at number 5, Seed of Chucky at number 4, Bride of Chucky number 3, Child's Play 2 number 2, and Child's Play 1 number 1. So they pretty much go like in, apart from 3, which is a bit of an outlier, they pretty much go in order. So I'd go like 1, 2, Bride, Seed, Curse, Cult, 3.
I like it. I think I'd go Bride of Chucky #1.
Mm-hmm.
Then the original Child's Play. Then Child's Play 2, #3.
Yeah.
Then Seed of Chucky.
Yeah.
Then Child's Play 3.
Ooh.
Because I just like it visually a bit more than the newer ones. So then I'd go Cult of Chucky and lastly Curse of Chucky.
Ooh.
I think that's my least favorite one.
Okay.
I'm a lot more forgiving of the 90s ones than I am of the 2010s ones.
Yeah, I think that makes sense.
Yeah. And before we wrap up, Becky, is there anything else about Chucky or any of the Chucky films that you wanted to say?
I don't think so. Like, just to reiterate that I think it's remarkable how for a film about a serial killer possessed doll that was made in 1988, we're now in 2024, and we've got a 4th series of a TV show. We've got, I think, Don Mancini talking about making a new film, and you kind of, based on this discussion alone and looking back at my ranking, like even looking back at my ranking, the one that I've got lowest on my list, so Child's Play 3, for me is still like a 3-star film. Mm-hmm, and you kind of, you just look at this huge time span of it existing, and for it to have been so just good, like all the way sort of throughout its existence, I think is just remarkable. And the only other sort of, I guess, films that span quite that amount of time with like so many entries would probably be like outside of the horror genre. So they might be, in action films or superhero films or something like that. But especially like within the horror genre, when you can have such high peaks and such low troughs when it comes to sequels and franchises. And like, I just think like Child's Play, like I said at the beginning, it just like delivers time and time again. And I think that's an amazing thing, and I think it should be respected for it.
Absolute full respect to the Chucky family.
And just keep it coming, because I'll keep watching. I
have just one last question for you, Becky. Do you think you could take Chucky?
No. Really? Yeah, I've got no game. Like, I honestly, there isn't like a violent bone in my body. Like I've got no fighting ability or skill or like strategic nous whatsoever. I'd be rubbish. And also, like, if he started calling me a filthy bitch and a dirty slut and kicking me in the chest, like, I just don't know what I'd do. I would just freak out. So, no, like, there's no way that I could take him. And I'm quite small anyway. Like, he's not that much smaller than me. He could definitely overpower me. Like, yeah, no, I'd have no fucking chance.
I just, like, I think maybe it's just because I'm a little bit maybe overconfident, or maybe because I'm quite tall. And I was like, you know what? If as long as he did not get on the floor, because then he'd cut my ankles like he does at one point.
Classic
and then you're fucked. Like, that's what happens at Pet Sematary as well. I was like, no chance with that. If he's eye level with you, he's gonna absolutely stab your face in. But if I'm holding him, I don't think his little legs could reach me. And
my arms are too short, I think. And he's a biter. Don't forget, he's a biter.
You know what, baby? So am I. Okay, so let's see who can bite the hardest. Okay.
Okay, I need like, I would buy tickets to this fight.
I think it was during as the franchise progressed, I was like, why is nobody just holding him at arm's length? You won't. He can't, like, he doesn't have upper body strength. He's not going to be able to, like, throw a knife at you. You know what I mean?
I know they've never like done the kind of Cape Fear thing where he's in prison, like lifting weights. Yeah, I mean, you make a good point, but I mean, still, no, I'm sticking with no. I'd have no chance.
I mean, I'm not inviting this fight. I don't want to, provoke any supernaturally possessed murder dolls.
It sounds to me like you're throwing down the gauntlet, Anna.
I think I'm feeling confident. Between like my upper body strength and my rage issues. I think I've got a fighting chance.
Yeah, I do not doubt your abilities at all. So if we're together and Chucky comes into the room, I'm pushing you in front of me. Let's just put it that way.
I'm not going to say this about all the horror villains. I definitely cannot take Freddy. Definitely cannot take Michael or Jason. Definitely not Megan. Yeah, I think I could probably take Chuck. As long as I can grab him. I think we'll be okay. And on that note.
Amazing.
Becky, always a pleasure. Thank you so much for talking about the Chucky films with me.
Thank you. I've loved it. I love these films and I've loved this chat.
So joyous. Thanks again.
You're welcome, baby.